Okay, so these are just a few medical school interview tips. So the first one is just to record yourself using a computer, for example, using the front-facing camera of a Mac. This will help you when you're practicing your interview questions to show you what type of hand motions are you making and how much eye contact are you making. And also if you're using a lot of filler words. So if you have all these different types of mistakes that you're making, recording yourself will allow you to see them and show you exactly what you're doing and exactly what the interviewer will see. So this will help you iron out any mistakes that you're making and help you improve your skills. Another one is just to go to interview workshops where they can critique you. These are usually offered at your school. I wouldn't really pay for the ones that they offer online, but if you really want it, I guess you can go for it because any sort of practice is always good for you. So another one is to, on the actual interview day, be prepared, right? And so to be prepared for the interview season in general, have two pairs of suits if you can afford it. That's what I did because it really helps if you have multiple interviews back to back. For example, on different weekends, that way you can have another suit ready and you don't have to dry clean it super fast. And just in case if one suit got ripped or anything, then you have a backup suit just in case. Another thing is during the interview season and during the interviews, you will usually have socials the day before. And so during these socials, the senior medical students can give you tips and they can give the pros and cons about why you should go to their school. And it's really useful, and I would really suggest that you go to these things because first of all, it shows you whether or not you like the atmosphere and the vibes of the school. And then second, the senior medical students will give you information that the faculty could never give you. They can give you things that you will go through that when you're going to the school. So another thing is if you get the chance on your actual interview day, go to the restroom before the interview just so that you don't have any urges to go to the restroom during the actual interview itself, and also just to make sure you look presentable. For example, interviews are usually after lunch, so make sure there's nothing in your teeth, just so that you make a really good first impression. During the interview, maintain a lot of eye contact, smile as much as you can, because in general, you like to see happy people and you want to make the best impression you can and try to leave them with the best impression. So smiling during the interview gives them a good impression of you and helps them feel a good vibe as long as it's natural. Don't smile unnaturally the entire time. So another thing is the most common questions asked during the interview. So overall, I can say the most prevalent question is, why do you want to be a doctor? So definitely have some type of framework prepared for this question because you have to dig deep down and see why you genuinely want to be a doctor. And if you don't have a reason, then you should consider why you are becoming a doctor, right? You have to have a good reason. For me, it was because my grandfather died at a young age, and this helped motivate me to pursue medicine. And something along that line, it doesn't have to be anything as dramatic as that. You can just say that medicine interests you because it's a bit of problem solving, talking with people, and just science in general. So it doesn't have to be anything life-changing, but you just have to tell the truth. And in a sort of unique way that's relevant to you. Try not to be too generic because they literally see thousands of different students over the course of the decades that they're interviewing. So try to be a little different than them. And it's up to you. Just dig deep down and try to find why you want to be a doctor. Another common question asked for almost every school is, why do you want to go to this school? And that's the one that you can't really BS because you genuinely have to do some research on it. For this, usually the day before, I would just go on their website and look at the pros and cons. For example, I would look at the curriculum, if I liked it, if they had a pass-fail, or I would see that they would integrate a lot of clinical experiences, which I really liked. And so actually research the school, not only for the interview, but for yourself. Would you really want to go to this school? Another thing is, what's a time you've resolved a conflict, or what's your research about? For example, I was in research and a lot of times they will ask you about stuff that's on your application. So if you aren't in research, they might ask you about volunteering or other things. But if you are in research, they will ask you about to explain your research. So definitely be prepared to explain it. Just, I have heard that if you do research that they know about, they will keep questioning you further and further on the details of your research, especially if it's a field that they're interested in about. So make sure you're prepared, and if there is something you don't know about, don't lie. Just say that you're not sure about that particular question. Another thing is, it's honestly not as bad as people make it out to be. Interviews are really casual. I would say 90% of my interviews that I went to were extremely casual, and they were just they may have started off with the why do you want to be a doctor, but after that it was just conversation. For example, I do these YouTube videos, right? And so they would ask me just conversation, oh, how'd you develop these videos, or what made you start making these videos? So make sure that you just know how to be a person, right? How to be social and how to just hold a conversation. And then don't be afraid to ask them questions about them, right? Another thing is, what's your weakness? So a lot of times people say that they're a perfectionist or they work too hard. So these types of things, I feel that most people say that, like, and since it's such a generic, I will give them that this is a terrible question. What's your weakness? Because I don't think anyone's going to say a genuine weakness. And I understand why everyone says the politically correct answer of they're a perfectionist or they work too hard. So don't say those things, because they've heard that excuse so many times and it'll seem really generic. But instead, try to find something that's a little bit politically correct, right? For example, me, I said that sometimes I worked not hard, but like in terms of like working hard and not smart. Like I would spend a lot of time memorizing instead of understanding. And then I realized this during my studies. So then I just improved my study techniques. So when you present the problem, right, with what's your weakness, also show a solution that, for example, for me, I had a solution that I learned better techniques to study. So that's really important. Show that you improved on your weakness and that you did something. Another weakness, for example, for me, is that I compare myself a lot to other people and their abilities and their skills and their achievements. So that's, I would say, another politically correct answer, because it's very genuine. And just say that you learn to accept yourself and that you've learned to be the best person you can potentially be. And so I definitely think those are better answers to this very odd question. Another thing during interviews is the ethics questions. For example, one of the questions I got was, what's your stance on stem cell research or euthanasia? I answered honestly, to my knowledge. Just for example, I said that I support euthanasia because I feel that the quality of a patient's life is better than letting the patient live for a long time but suffering the entire time. So just learn about these different controversial topics. If you honestly don't know anything about the topic, then say it. Say that you don't know or you don't have enough information to answer the topic, and they will respect you for that. Because if you lie about it, that's just an indicator of what you might do as a doctor, right? As a doctor, would you lie to a patient if you didn't know the answer to a medical question? No, right? You would say that you don't know, and then you would go find out for them. So just look up websites and just look up the different types of ethics questions for medical school interviews, and a bunch of sites will pop up. And they're super useful. Just look at the different laws in your state. For example, for Texas, where I live, just look up abortion laws, right? So if they ask me an abortion question, I would know how to reasonably answer that. So definitely, and in general, for interview questions, don't memorize your question, or don't memorize the answer, right? So if they ask you a question, don't write down an answer and then just memorize it and spit it back out. It sounds super robotic if you do that, and they can easily see through that you're just memorizing the question. And plus, it also gives you a bad habit of only relying on memorization and not being able to create a answer on the fly. So try to create a framework. For example, for me, if they ask me, tell me a time where you failed, I can use my experience as a scribe and say that, oh yeah, the first few days were really rough on me and it was very difficult, but then I slowly learned how to improve my technique. I watched videos, asked other scribes, and then I got better over time. And so I can also use this experience of being a scribe when they said, what was the time you worked in a team? Because you work in a team with the physician and the other nurses to help give a better experience for the patient. And so definitely use your experiences as a framework for different questions. So how, for example, scribing is just one experience, but I can use multiple facets of that experience to answer multiple different questions, right? So try to do that instead of memorizing an answer to every different variation of a question. So another thing is after the interviews, right? You'll usually have a feeling of how the interview went based on your ability to answer the question and how the interviewer responds, right? Because if you can answer every question that they throw at you, then you have an idea that the interview went pretty well. But don't worry about it too much, because there are interviews that sometimes you just feel like it didn't go well because maybe the interviewer had a flat affect or they were frowning the entire time. But don't worry about it, right? Because, for example, I felt that out of my, I think, 6 interviews that I had, I would say that 5 of them went really well and I felt really good about it. And the weird thing about Texas is that you don't actually know all the schools you get into. You only know if you got into a school based on a pre-match. And so I got pre-matches at 3 schools, and I felt that the interviews at 2 of those schools went really well. And so I wasn't surprised by getting interviews there. But the one school that I'm currently going to go to, that school, the interview, I thought went okay, but definitely not my best interview. But I was surprised that I got a pre-match. So anything's possible during these interviews. So don't worry about how it went. Just do your best and then forget about it. And then just worry about it when the acceptance letters come along. Another question that I thought of is they might ask you, tell me a little bit about yourself as their introductory question. So this is a pretty hard question just because it's so vague. So for this, I would recommend that you only have a 30-second response. And so it's kind of a debate between whether you should mention anything about medicine or not. But I would stick with mentioning something about medicine, about why you want to be a doctor. Kind of those 2 questions overlap. But I think you want to show that you're passionate about medicine, even though some people might advocate to talk about things other than medicine, because they know you want to be a doctor. But it's honestly up to you. But I would err on the side of talking about medicine because you want to show that at the end of the day, you really want this and you really want to be a doctor. So I hope that helped, and thanks for watching.